Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. All right, today I'm going to continue review of CDFM module 3.1, which is the fiscal law, and I'm using the 2018 study guide. So we're going to pick up on page 3.1.27, where we're talking about purpose, time, and amount. So we're going to look at the amount statute. There are 31 U.S. code that covers the amount of the appropriation. You got 31 U.S. code, 1341, 1342, and 1517. So we're going to look at the differences between both. All right, the next page, page 28, talks about the 31 U.S. code, 1341. It says no officer or employee of the United States government can make or authorize expenditures or obligation exceeding. So you can't spend no more than you have, or you can't spend funding before you receive the funding. So that's what it's talking about in 1341, which applies to the majority of us. So there are 6 different forms of budget authority on page 29, which talks, you could put it in ABC order: appropriations, borrowing authority, contract authority, monetary credits, loans and loan receipt, offsetting collections. So basically what it's saying is for us to expend or obligate government funding, we must have some type of budget authority to do so. And it must be either one of those 6. It'll fall into that category. Page 30, it just talks about some of the limitations that Congress places on the appropriation. They may either say you cannot spend in excess of, so there's a ceiling, the limit in how much we can spend that appropriation on. No less than, meaning it's a floor, that's the bottom number. They're telling you you must spend X amount of dollars on this purchase, these expenditures. Or they put a fence around the appropriation, so they give it exclusive rights or budget authority to spend on whatever that item is. So the concept of earmarking or limitations placed on the appropriation. All right, 31 U.S. Code 1342 deals with voluntary services. So basically what it says on page 31 is that you must have authority, as mentioned before, but 1342 pretty much says I cannot accept voluntary services for a position that requires monetary expenses. For example, if I have a government position, let's say a GS-12 position, and I have a spouse of a service member that says, you know what, you don't have to pay me, but can I come in and sit with the budget analyst and learn the job? You don't have to pay me anything. Well, what this is saying is if that position is a paid government position, I cannot accept voluntary services for that position. And the exceptions are listed on page 31, where it talks about if the position can be, the pay can be fixed to a 0. For example, FRG. That's the best example I can think of. Some of those positions, they may be paid now, but it may be a situation where you can lower that payment to 0. That is an exception where you can accept. Or the position Red Cross, candy stripers, museum volunteers, those are all statutory authorized gratuitous positions. So they already been stated that you can accept voluntary services. So 1341 U.S. Code, 31 U.S. Code 1341 says I can't spend appropriations before I receive it, or monetary obligations before or in excess of what I receive. 31 U.S. Code 1342 says I cannot accept voluntary services for a position that's fixed by law to be paid. And then the next one is 31 U.S. Code 1517. It says apportionment on page 32. Automatically, when you hear the word apportionment, you should think, well, who apportions? Remember, Congress appropriates the money. OMB conducts the apportionment process. So automatically, this tells me that 31 U.S. Code 1517 is referring to those agencies that receive apportionment from OMB, such as Department of Defense, Department of Education, Department of State, and so forth. So if asked, who does this law apply to, you will know because OMB apportions to the agencies. The agencies issues allotment, which you'll see on the next page. So I just wanted to point that out. So when it talks about purpose, time, and amount is covered in 31 U.S. Code 1341, 1342, and 1517. 1517 dealing with apportionment. So on page 33, it gives you the funding flow. Next to appropriation, you should write Congress. Congress appropriates the money. The second step is the apportionment process. Next to the apportionment, you should write Office of Management and Budget, OMB, because OMB apportions to the agencies. Department of Defense, that individual or the title of that individual is the Undersecretary of Defense Comptroller, the USD Comptroller. You got to know that chain of command in the financial management realm. So the DOD issues allotment. The rest of us, we commit, obligate, and outlay. Outlay is the same thing as we refer to as disbursement, but you will not see the word disbursement in the study guide. Outlay is when the funds are removed from the treasury to pay that bill. Remember, this is tied back into Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution, which says we cannot get any money out of the treasury unless we have a valid appropriation law. So that's what the funding flow is talking about. So can we augment, if we don't like how much money the DOD gives us, can we augment our appropriation? The now normal rule is no, you cannot, unless you have a statute, a law that says, okay, you can recycle and get the money back through the MWR channels, you can get the money back into your organization. So anything that we do with government funding, we must have the authorization and authority to do so. All right, so page 35 now talks about gifts and donation. Can we accept gifts from outside entities, gifts to employees, gift to the U.S.? In most instances, when you read through the study guide, it says there are limitations in the gifts we can receive. So on page 35 at the bottom, if you notice the study guide, it refers you back to Module 1, Competency 2, Manpower Management, that deals with gifts, because this particular section does not go into detail. All they have is that one page. But when you go back to Module 1, it gives you the dollar amount. And the dollar amount for gifts to employees is we are limited to a donation of $10 per employee. If you go back to Module 1, it also says that I can accept a gift from a contractor. The value cannot be more than $20 for that one item, and within a fiscal year, the value total from that contractor cannot exceed $50. So those are some of the things. So remember with this exam, it's not strictly just that section that you're studying. You have to also refer to the Module 1 and the Module 2 to get all the information you need for the Module 3, because they overlap, and you will find that as you go through the study guides. So gifts and donation, remember $10 from subordinate to a superior. You should not donate no more than $10. So those are the ADAs. Now, what if we have an Anti-Deficiency Act? That means we violated either the purpose, the time, or the amount of that appropriations. On page 57, it tells us our reporting requirements. It says that once you identify you have an ADA violation, you have 10 days to report it to your hire. Then once that initial report is complete, you have 14 weeks to complete your review, discovery. Is it a true ADA violation? What happened? How do you ensure that it doesn't happen again? Those are things that you are required to do. All right, so let's switch over now to page 3139, where it talks about criteria for recording obligation. At the bottom, it gives you a list of 9 items. Basically, those items are are the required documentation necessary for us to obligate government funds. As financial managers, we can't simply take the word of our command or director, hey, go ahead and obligate XYZ. We have to have documentation. If you don't have it in writing, it doesn't happen or it didn't happen. So you have contracts, you have MIPers, you have travel orders. There are different things to obligate the funding. But the recording principle on page 40 says promptly. It's like managing your checkbook. If you know you spend XYZ or X amount of dollars, you need to go ahead and record it so that you know that the balance you're looking at is the true balance for what you actually have in your accountability. Page 41 goes into continuing resolution. So I pause here again. Why do we need continuing resolutions? Why do we need a CR at the end of September going into October if we do not have an appropriation law approved by Congress? Again, tying into Article 1 says I'm talking to the legislative branch, Congress. Congress cannot appropriate, if Congress does not appropriate the money, the funding before 1 October, we need a stopgap appropriation, which is a continuing resolution, a Band-Aid to hold us over until that appropriation law can be put in place. So that's what a continuing resolution is. It's a temporary appropriation. Stopgap, meaning I cannot exceed what I spent at the same time the year prior. I got to use those guidelines until Congress appropriates the money for that new fiscal year. So you must operate under the same rate of operation of last year. So what happens then once Congress appropriates the money? And let's say I've already spent $5 million, but Congress only appropriated $4 million. Have I committed an ADA violation? The answer to that is no. If operating under a continuing resolution, I stayed within the guidelines of the CR, I did not spend any more than I did last year, and it happened to be $5 million, and then Congress comes back and only appropriated $4 million. No, I didn't conduct an ADA violation because I operated within the guidelines I had at that time. So what happens is if I only have $4 million, so now I need to reprioritize all the things I have left to ensure that so now I really only have $3 million left because I have to take that one that I've already spent, and now I need to ensure that I only have that $1 million left to do whatever else I have to do. That's just a quick example. All right, let's see. Sequestration on 45. We've heard that term quite extensively before. Automatic federal cuts that are given to the budget. It's like sequestration is saying, all right, all the organization is taking a 10% cut, and we keeping the money to do something else. So that's sequestration. Accountable officials. All right, let's go to page 49, where it talks about advanced directives. Remember, as financial managers, it is imperative for us to learn the law, the fiscal law, when it comes to dealing with these appropriations. We cannot simply rely on or JAG, our legal folks, or ethical lawyers to tell us how to spend, because guess what? They're not the ones that certify these funds. We are. So we also have to, that's why you need fiscal law to be certified as fiscal law. And you also need to know what the guidelines are for the appropriations that you are approving. So you can receive advanced directive, get it in writing from your hire to say that, okay, yes, we know you want to do XYZ. We are signing off, approving your request. So you're not operating on your own. So what are the statute of limitation on page 51? When it comes to financial management, it says if it's an error. So remember, as financial managers, even if we make a mistake, we could still get in trouble. Whether I put an extra zero on a request versus, okay, if it's 1,000 and I put 10,000, that's a big difference. So you can have, for error, you can be separated from that position. You can be placed in another position, because if it's for error, the statute of limitation is 3 years from the time I made that mistake and the time of discovery. And for fraud, if it's a fraud, there's no timeline on that. So if you try to defraud the government and they find out 10 years later, you can still be prosecuted. So that's what it's saying. So the basic idea behind fiscal law, if nothing else you get from this, is you have to have the budget authority authorization in writing to spend the funds according to how they have been issued from Congress. So this concludes the end of the fiscal law portion. Actually, you know what? Let's go to page 53, because you have the charts with the definition and description. I want to point out on page 53, because this I don't think was mentioned inside the information itself, but it's on the chart. If you look at item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on page 53, it says the 41 U.S. Code 6301 Feed and Forage Act. That's probably different. The only difference that I saw that was not in the information. The Feed and Forage Act basically gives the Department of Defense the ability to spend more than we have if the Department of Defense, let's say in a storm, in a deployed environment, and the Department of Defense need to purchase medical items, vehicles, place for the individuals to stay, for safety, for security, and they have to spend more than they have, they can do it under the authority of 41 U.S. Code Feed and Forage Act. They need food that they need to purchase that has to go through a particular channel. That's the law that gives the Department of Defense the ability to spend more than they have. So thank you. This concludes CDFM Module 3.1 out of the 2018 Study Guide. Be sure to subscribe, and I will get back with you on the 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4. Thank you, and I'll see you guys again next time.